So what I'd like to start with is having an opportunity to learn a little bit about Ariel and where she's from, her backstory. Many years ago, I learned in a philosophy course that when you look at a leader, everybody is responding towards or against something from their formative years. And if you look back to a leader's formative years, you learn a lot about kind of the motives or what shapes how they are operating today. And Ariel, you are from?
Cleveland, Ohio, originally.
Okay.
By way of
By
many
way.
others.
So originally you're from, but you have memories from Cleveland,
Oh, yeah,
Ohio.
yeah. I was there until I was 17.
And you were in a distinctive part of Cleveland, because there's different parts of Cleveland, so we might lump, kind of like Omaha, everybody thinks cows, right? But there's some areas of Cleveland, and you were in a distinctive part.
Yeah, I was in Cleveland Heights, which is, I would say, descriptively, it's very similar to Dundee.
Okay.
Older part of the neighborhood. You know, one street goes into downtown, so you're pretty close. But in the 70s, there was a real intentional effort to integrate, and so they were actually forcing, not forcing contracts, but choosing people that are mixed races to live in the community. And so that was, I was born in 76, so I just grew up in this community that was really integrated. And I mean by everything. It was everything from race, religion, female-owned businesses, and that's how I grew up. So I had no idea I had this unique experience until I started moving around, realizing what's wrong with everybody.
So that was your norm. You knew no different.
Yeah, I really didn't.
You knew no different from that.
Yeah.
Is it a councilman, a state? There's a politician here in
Yeah,
town
Ben Gray.
Ben Gray,
Yeah.
in the same area.
He did
And
grow up
his-
in Cleveland Heights.
I'm sorry, same area, Cleveland.
Yeah,
And had some comments about where you.
Yeah, he has family that's in Cleveland Heights, and then his family that's not. And he didn't grow up in Cleveland Heights, and he said he mentioned that that's a very unique area. That's why, you know, my perspective of Cleveland is not Cleveland. It's actually Cleveland Heights, and he kind of walked me through all that, which was really interesting. Yeah, I had no idea.
So where did you go to college?
University of Miami, Florida.
Okay, and why'd you pick?
I was graduating high school a year early, and my mom said, you can go anywhere in Ohio that I can drive to, or anywhere that within an hour's distance from your grandfather, and he lived in Florida. And so I said, I'll apply to one school, and if I don't get in, I'll just, you know, wait a year and go with everybody else. And so I got in and left.
And that's kind of a crazy school, right? Was it a crazy school?
You know, I was in the theater and film departments, and
So-
so they're more geeky, and, you know, I wasn't part of the frat sorority scene. I wasn't part of the football scene. I was usually our classes started at like 7:30 in the morning, and we would be in rehearsals and shows
Until-
at 11 at night. So I mean, we had fun, but it was definitely a more smaller environment, oddly enough.
So the degree that you earned?
So I have 2 degrees. One is in Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in performance theater, and then the other one is in film business.
Okay. And you got both of those as an
Undergrad, yeah. Mhm.
So tell us about how you started your career.
So I was, I would say most, you know, successful graduates start off in retail. You know, you graduate and you have no idea what to do, and you're thinking that everything's gonna happen, and it doesn't. So I was working retail and substitute teaching, and a friend of mine from film school came in, and I knew he did not have a lot of money, but he was still buying all kinds of things. And I was checking him out, and I was like, Pat, where are you working? And I need to work there. And he said, oh, there's this really great studio down on South Beach that just opened up, and you should check it out. I think they're still hiring production assistants. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I called, and they said, no, actually we filled all those positions. We have one position open, and it's in music rights and clearance. It's in our legal department. And I thought, okay. And they said, well, you know, if you want to interview, you can come down. So I'm like, you know, I'll at least come down, right, and see if I can find some way of getting into this place. And so when I went down there, he said, look, you know, one mistake on music rights can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you tell me why you think you would be good at this job. And I said, well, if you have a person I can talk to or a book I could read, I'll be fine. Because in the end, I thought, you're just talking about rules. That's all you're talking about. So if we can read the rule, understand it, comprehend it, and enforce it, we're probably good. So he gave me the job. And so I started actually in the legal department of, it became a television station at the time. I thought it was a production house. So I thought we were actually producing shows and films for distribution, which we were doing for about 6 or 7 months, maybe almost a year. And then literally they started building a master control in the middle of the floor. And I said, what is that room? And they said, well, that's master control. And I said, what is a master control? And they said, well, that's, it's a broadcast station. That's where everything gets fed out, and that's where all the, shows are going to be broadcast from. And I said, this is a television station? Like, nobody knew. Everybody was just being wildly creative and having a great time, making mistakes freely because nothing was over the air yet. And then it ended up happening. So I went into the editor-in-chief and I said, hey, question. We have 24 hours in a day. We have 13 original shows. Some of them are half hours. What else are we going to run? And he said, congratulations, you're our program director. And he handed me all these, and this is not like a flyby, this was actually Barry Diller's brainchild broadcast station, and it was from USA Network. So it's not like it was this fly-by-night. It was the whole purpose. It was very intentional for it to be wildly creative and have no rules. And so he handed me these books, and it was things like The Bionic Woman, Munsters, Three Stooges, and so I was just like, all right, well, I'll just pick the shows I like. So I had things like, I think Three Stooges was our news lead-in. I had the Munsters coming out of news. I had all the shows I liked, Bionic Woman.
And how old are you at this time?
24.
24, okay.
No, 22.
22?
Yep.
Okay.
And so I picked all the shows, and it was good. And I was, I think I worked there from, well, I was program director there, and then they opened up a live show, and they wanted someone to be the executive producer of this show, which basically coordinated, it was 1 minute every 20 minutes from 6 p.m. to midnight. So I had 2 trucks and 5 locations, so it was all over the place. So I had these little 1 minute spots that you could basically use for promotion of a different show, sales, so we worked with Ford and things like that, openings of new clubs or restaurants, or news. We could do breaking news in those too. And so I just got to play, and I got to do a lot of different things. I was at a young age in a lot of rooms that I was wise enough to just listen. And I knew, I would say 50% of the time I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew it was really important and it was going to all come together soon. So I had this, I think I made $20,000. It was the cheapest program director in Miami you've ever had to pay. But it was like a well-paid internship, and I got to do a lot of things there. So I had a great time. We actually just had our 20th reunion 2 weeks ago in Miami.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was really fun.
So take us from there to, I know that you didn't spend your entire career with that station. Obviously you're here, and there's a journey that takes you from there to here. Can you kind of walk through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, so that station was sold to Telemundo or Univision, I can't remember which. I just knew I didn't speak Spanish. So the general manager of that television station moved to Dayton, Ohio. He hired me there. So I moved up to Dayton, Ohio. I had a 1-year-old at the time. And I thought, well, that'll be great because I'll be close to family. And, Cleveland wasn't that far. But again, just realizing the rest of Ohio really isn't like Cleveland. So it wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. But when I got there, I would say within 6 months, he said, I was hired to do something similar that I was doing in Miami. I was doing kind of interstitial shows with clients and news and promotions. And so when I got there, I think it was about 4 months, and he said, look, we have to cancel that. We can't do that show anymore. And I had just moved my family, you know, we made this big transition. My husband and I had figured out who was staying home, and he had decided to stay home, so it was this big.
So you were the primary
Yeah.
income generator for the family.
And he said, but I'm gonna offer you a job in sales. And I said, I'm not gonna be one of your sleazy salespeople. I think I might have stopped my foot or something really immature like that too. And he said, well, that's why I want you to be a salesperson. And so, you know, it really did make me understand, look, it's not about doing things the way stereotypically people think they should be done. It's about doing things the way that you know is right in your heart, and that's valuable, right? So I became a salesperson, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the main reason I loved it was, you know, when I was growing up, my mom had a vegetarian restaurant in Cleveland Heights in the 80s. So it was not always the most successful venture, if you can imagine. And it was the only vegetarian restaurant in the state of Ohio. Yeah. It might still be, I have no idea. But I did that, and we all worked the restaurant. You know, we all grew up and we worked really hard. And you know, my mom had 5 kids, and then we adopted 2 more later when I was in college. And I really understood like hard work at a young age. But more than anything, I understood how kids can make a difference. And you know, at 5 years old, you were old enough to roll silverware at the restaurant. You know, so we'd roll the silverware, and then that was our little job. But you felt proud to be able to contribute to your family business. And when I became a salesperson, I realized there were so many things that, you know, my mom built her business on passion, on doing the right thing, on this vision of, you know, giving people a healthier choice. And it wasn't financially that as successful as it could have been because we didn't have the business knowledge. And when I became a salesperson, and my whole role was meeting with local businesses and making their brands stronger and trying to help them through this really tough time because their passion is their people and their business. I felt great. I mean, I felt like I was really helping local businesses do something that, you know, I wish my family could have had.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you connected it to your.
Yeah, it was really personal for me. I didn't expect that at all. But that's where, like, and even here I would say at KETV, we are, you know, we're very focused on making sure we give people tons of research. I will even tell people sometimes I have a program that tells them, you know, if they're gonna buy radio, then buy these for your brand because this is what matches up with what you want. I mean, I want people to be successful. So I try to bring that in every part of our lives.
So you go from sales. So you start, your degree is in theater performance and in business. And you start out in retail. You go from retail to kind of being a paralegal-y kind of person.
Yeah,
is that
legal,
right? Yeah.
pretty much.
From because you said, okay, I can figure it out. And this
Right.
is a theme that you'll hear with Ariel. You go from that to being a programming director. Yes, right.
Yep.
Picking the Munsters and the Three
Yep.
Stooges
Yep.
to lead in and out of the news at night.
Yep.
22-year-old.
Hey, it worked.
And then move up to Dayton, and in Dayton you had a show that you produced that were.
And I did that in Miami as well.
And in Miami, and then went into sales. So, kind of a quick thumbnail sketch. What gets you to become the president and CEO of KETV?
So when you got into sales, then I started to understand the business side of it more. I moved from Dayton, Ohio to Hawaii, and I was in sales there. It was a tough gig.
Hawaii's not like Cleveland either, is it?
No, it was great though. I
Yeah.
loved it. I never understood when people are like, and I can never live on that island. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you kidding me? Like when people would ask me to go see them, I'm like, why? Just, you come here.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I did not get it, so I never got sick of that place. But I was in sales there, and that was great just culturally too, understanding. I became completely obsessed with Hawaiian culture and history, and I knew it better than most Hawaiians at the time of the ones I met. And then I moved to California, and that was all like people would call me and say, this job is opening, you need to talk to this person. So I wasn't really looking to move. I really wasn't looking to move to Hawaii at all. But my sister lived in San Francisco, and this woman called me, and she actually offered me a position as the general sales manager at her, which is kind of like second to the GM, at her station in Redding, California. And so my sister's in San Francisco, so I was like, oh yeah, it's only 3 hours away, that would be perfect. And sadly left Hawaii, but then she ended up moving to Omaha. She was the general manager here. She's still with Hearst, and she's in Kansas City now. And so when she called, she said, I have this job opportunity in Omaha. You should probably check it out. So I did.
You came here as?
The general sales manager.
The general sales manager.
So I worked here for about a year in that position, and then she left, and I got the job.
So I'm going to step out here, and I want you to walk through your story of why we're in this building.
Sure.
And the fascinating choices that you made, and the Hearst Corporation
Yeah.
made in choosing this. And you'll find it's very value-centric, just as the other choices are that Ariel has made. So I'm going to
Sure.
give you this back.
Yeah. People laugh at me because they say I have two sons and a building. And it's true. This whole project took me about 4 years. So I became general manager in December of 2011. Well, November of 2011. December of 2011, my CFO came, Janyne, and he said, I knew part of the job was going to be, you have to find a new building, period. Like that was part of the gig. And so I said, well, great. So literally I'd been in the job a few weeks, and my CFO says he's coming to town. We're going to go look at some properties and some buildings and see what we can do. Well, I said to him, that's great, but what I really want is to make sure that this is something that is all about KETV, reflects KETV and our personality, and very local. And what I don't want to happen is for this guy from New York to come in and the brokers start showing him what they think the guy from New York wants, imagining, the Hearst Tower, Hearst Corporate, because that's not KETV. It's a big part of KETV, but it's not our brand. And he said, yeah, that's actually, I totally got it, no problem. And so he said something brilliant. He said to the brokers, show me everything you think meets our specs. But then show me 2 properties that you think I would think is completely insane. And so right off the bat, he gave them permission to fail, right? Right off the bat, which completely engaged them in the process, because that also was a little challenging. Like, all right, I'll see if I can show you something that you think is crazy, right? And it really allowed us to open our minds up immediately. So we did look at everything. But when we decided to look at the 2 buildings, it was this building, and actually it was also the post office across the street was the other one that we looked at. When we did all of that the day before, and then when we went into the city the next morning to just make sure that we weren't, missing something, and that they had some plan that we wanted to be a part of, they showed us everything. They didn't show us this building. And at the very end of the meeting, they leaned forward and they said, and I said, hey, what do you think about that Burlington building? I don't know, we were kind of thinking maybe it would be interesting. And Ken Johnson, who, I don't know if you know Ken Johnson, the city planner at the time, but he's been there for a long time. He slams his hands on the desk, he stands up, he looks at everybody in the room, and there's about 15 people from the city in the room, and he says, if you want to make that happen, we will help you make that happen. It was like, and I tell that story because you don't often get that kind of enthusiasm from the city. And what that did for my boss was, on this terrifying project of this building is completely, I mean, it's about to fall down, but that sounds like a great idea. You know, gave him confidence that, well, if the city's behind us, if something really happens that's horrible, we'll be able to make it because we got the city that wants us to succeed, right? And we didn't actually end up having to lean on them too much in the end, but it was just that confidence builder in the beginning for a project like this that really made people go, okay, this is something that not only do we feel like it's a good thing to do we feel like it might be the right thing to investigate, but actually we're in this town and the city thinks it's a good idea too, so it felt like a win-win. So it was all about, I mean, in the end it was all about Omaha. Let's see if I can make this work, okay. So this is our pretty building now. So part of the process was really, who are we, right? So when you have this building, you think, you know, I'm going to be creating a new home for 125 employees, and one of the things I have to keep in mind is, you know, who are they, right? Because when I buy a house, I want to know, you know, do I like to walk to work? Do I want my kids to walk to school? Do I want it to be trendy? Do I want it to be by a park? I have all those thoughts, right? Well, it's the same kind of thing when you're moving into a new building. What is the environment like? Who are these people? And so when you look at that, let's see if this works. When you look at that, it's actually, I mean, I thought I had to wake up early, but apparently technology has more trouble. But one of the things that we looked at is, you know, we tell stories, right? And so our news organization, you know, my news director at the time had been here over 25 years. So that's 30, she just retired, but she'd been here 31 years. She was there in the tornado of 1975. She remembers that, she reported on that. You know, she tells me stories of when she got out and out of her car, she couldn't recognize 84th Street or 78th at all. And she remembers seeing a family come up from their basement to nothing, that the house was totally gone, and their expression on their face. She remembers seeing a child who was running up the street right after the tornado, and the family was running towards them because he was at his friend's house at the time. And they were just praying to God. They got in the basement and they had no idea, right? Those things never leave you. They never leave a reporter. So when you think of that, and then you think of things like, I think I also have, yeah, here we go. Oh, she's working. In 2003, our transmitter fell. So we have an engineering department that had to rebuild a transmitter. Think about that. That doesn't happen. Usually you build them and they stay forever, right? No, our engineering team is still here, the ones that did that. So they know how to do this. They know how to actually have, you know, a blinking light in the sky that you think is always there, and suddenly it's not, and your signal is gone. And you have to ask, what happened? The tower literally fell down like dominoes because the guide wires weren't secured properly. Luckily nobody was hurt, it fell the way it was supposed to, but they had to rebuild that completely from the ground up, and they had to navigate that whole thing on how do we figure this out? We have to serve the community, we don't have a signal, so we have to work with our competitors, right? And these are huge technology challenges. And then, of course, technology did not slow down. So before it was really great, right? I could just count on all of you guys to turn in the television on at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and in the morning. And there were only a few channels, so competition, not that big of a deal, right? You wanted weather? You had to come to us. No one else has weather. That's changed. So there's the Weather Channel 24/7. There's all kinds of cable channels. You don't have to come at 5, 6, and 10. You can watch my news whenever you want, wherever you want, and you expect it to be that way, right? I have to meet your expectations. That's the job. You're the customer. You guys have a lot of needs, right? And one of the things is, you should. This is important local information. You want it the way you want it, and you want it when you want it. So I've got to figure that out. We have to anticipate it. We have to build platforms that do that. Then we have really sad things that happen, right? So we're never going to forget these people. We're never going to forget them. You know, Peyton Benson, I saw her mom at a at a protest for guns, for assault rifles, and I saw her there, and I just went up to her and hugged her, and you know, she just fell apart, right? Because we have connections with people. We're not just reporting a story. And what you see on television is a minute and a half. You don't see the beginning of that interview, the end of that interview, the you know, just holding each other sometimes and trying to help them, right? These are horrible stories. She was literally, you know, her mom told her to put her dishes away, and she did it really nicely and got up, and as soon as she got up to put her dishes away, that's when the bullet hit her from over a block away through her house, right? Those are those stories that are, how can that happen, right? How can it? I mean, Carrie Roscoe, I mean, she was about to have her baby. She purposely, like that sacrifice that we make all the time. When are we gonna have that maternity leave? We want to make sure that makes the most amount, the biggest impact for our child, right? So she delayed it so that her child, because her child was in intensive care, and when they came out of intensive care, that's when she wanted to be with her. She was just about to have that. It was her last day before maternity leave, right? And she was shot and killed. But these are the stories that we tell, and they never leave you. It's a part of who we are. So when you're asking, you know, what kind of home do you want? Well, you know, when you talk about that, you really say we need to have a home that is a reflection of Omaha. It is not about KTV. It is not about who we are and how fancy we are and all that, period. So that's why we ended up having the Burlington train station. So this is what the Burlington train station looked like in 1898. It was originally built for the Trans-Mississippi Exposition, and it opened on July 4th, 1898, so this is actually our 120th anniversary on July 4th, which is pretty cool. But it was really special. I mean, when you look at the columns there, the columns are now standing in front of Memorial Stadium. So they were actually taken out in the 30s because they realized that the Durham was going to be building in Art Deco style, and they said, well, we want to do that. And so they took all the columns out, shipped them down to Lincoln. They actually lost the columns for several years. I don't know how you lose those columns, but they did. And when they found them, all their plans that they had for the columns were done, and so they just put them up in front of the stadium. At least that's how I tell the story, I'm sure. Someone else will have a much more dramatic story. Okay, so then this is what it would have looked like in the Grand Hall in 1898. And all these pictures we started to really, I mean, we kind of became obsessive about it. So this was before we purchased the building. I started to really do the research on what is this building? It's cool, but what is it? Because it's really grand. We don't need grand. You know, we're scrappy. we have deadlines and we need to get them done. But this was the Grand Hall originally, and so you know when you walked through the building, you would have seen this, you know, which is absolutely stunning. None of that, of course, was there when I got it. This isn't, you know, one of the incredible balls that they had. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that was happening. And this was actually a picture of the Trans-Mississippi Exposition. They actually took, as payment for the volunteers, basically, for the Spanish-American War, they took them up on the train and let them spend the weekend at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition, which is pretty cool. So I went through this entire, presentation and looked through all the history and thought, okay, we've got to figure out if we can do this, right? And so we finally got to the point where I decided, you know, I think we got through, we got the due diligence, which took us about 9 months. We got through the history, everything else. Finally, we talked to Hearst, and it got to the point, and I think this has been 2 years now, where we said, look, at some point we've got to figure out if we're going to do this or not. I think Hearst really wanted to do it. But it was scary. The building had been vacant for 40 years. 40 years. So, you know, that's a little much when you think about, or is this going to be our home, right? So I went, but I was excited because finally we got to do it. And I had been picturing for 2 years now my entire staff and station moving into this building. And in my mind, it was really clear. exactly how it was going to be. I mean, I knew where the rooms were, I knew where our conference room was, I knew it all. I had it mapped out. And I was excited. I knew where people would be eating and hanging out. It was great. So I couldn't wait to show them this. And so when I'm standing in front of them, I tell them, this is your new home. Mistake number one. That didn't really get anybody very excited. So then I flipped it around. Isn't it great? So that was my first lesson on when you're trying to navigate change. When you have been in a process, and this is actually for, I use this lesson all the time, because every time we do a strategy, every time we do a strategy meeting, or we sit down and we come up with our budget plan, or some new promotion, or whatever, everything has changed, right? It's not just moving. What we forget is that we've all been doing that. We've all been planning it, we've all been thinking it through, we've been trying to figure it out, we've changed it a few times, we've scratched our head and gone, oh, that's not gonna work. And then when it was all said and done, we were so excited that it was, one, over, that we got through it, and so excited to actually implement this great plan, that we just jumped right in and expected everyone to be that excited too. And that's what I did here, and it was a huge mistake, because, big point here, the building is 40 years vacant. So if you're under 40, you don't even know it's there. You've probably never been there. There's no reason to go. If you were there, you shouldn't have been, right? And so, and it probably wasn't the best experience. And so, but this is how I set that up. So the first question that came to me was from Adrian Woodsett, who was our 5 p.m. anchor at the time. He's now in Orlando with Hearst. And he raises his hand, he's like, Ariel, did you consider any other options? And I said, yeah, I mean, but this is good. So, but immediately what I understood was, I have to take them on a journey. I have 125 employees. I've got 2 years, basically, to build this building. So I planned for 2 years, and I knew I had about 2 years later to actually get everything done. So the one thing I did was I didn't try and jam it all in, right? I used patience, because everybody needs to be able to come to this conclusion on their own, at their own time. And if they own it, it's 10 times more powerful. So what I did was I set out a plan to really try to hit all those learning styles within 2 years and repeat them. So some of the things we did were, we did tours. So I had, even though it was a construction site, I had hard hats for everybody, and I would do 10 people at a time, and I'd tour them around the building. Some people hated that because they thought, they couldn't envision what I was going to have, so it was even worse. They're like, I thought it was bad, now it's really bad, But it actually gave them a really great appreciation when it was done. And so I just had to let myself be uncomfortable with the fact that we were going to walk through this, and they were probably going to, a lot of them were probably going to think that I'm even crazier than they thought I was before. But in the end, they're part of KETV, and I wanted them to own that experience of, we did this, like it could have never been done. We could have just made this a hill and had picnics on it, But we didn't do that. We put the work in to really make this a beautiful part of the community and help revitalize 10th Street. And so I wanted them to have that experience. So some of that is you gotta be uncomfortable for a little bit. You gotta walk them through, let them see how tough it is. The other thing we did was we had quarterly meetings where I would do videos, and I would come in and do a video update every single time, because I really wanted to look at it from the perspective of if what we do is tell stories and use video, I want to speak their language. And so I brought our photographers in, and I had them do videos, and we would speak their language. I also really tried to engage them on anything that I could let people have a decision on. So if I knew that I really don't care what chair you sit in, but it's all going to be the same chair, guys. So, then I brought in, 5 or 6 different chairs. I let everybody try them for like a few months. They voted, they picked their chairs. Things that I knew I could give them any kind of authority on, I tried to do that because I really wanted people to be a part of this and feel like this was their home. So, let's see, so I did that, and then, come on, creating a culture that thrives through change. You get to the next slide. Come on. All right, so as we walk through, there was a few things that I tried to get done, and I would say some of it was environmental changes in the sense that I was definitely going to have new areas for people to work in that was completely different. So in some areas we went from offices to one table. So it was really about trying to prepare people for that too. I also knew that if I was able to get people to like change and embrace change and see the benefit of change, we were going to be a stronger organization in the end. And so every moment I had that was all about, it was all about trying to direct people through it and see the value in it. We were able to do that. And I did that on many different ways. Articulate the vision, sorry, here we go. Okay, so this is where we did this. So I walked them through the building. This is kind of something that you would have seen. When I walked into this building, there were so many pigeon feathers you couldn't see that floor. I had no idea there was a mosaic tile floor at all. Yeah, it was really pretty. But as I walked through this, I had to be able to show them, like, this is what it is now, but let's talk about what it can be. And when we talk about our stories at KETV, a lot of times we tell these really tough stories to tell because we want people to see a part of the community so that they can change it. Because that's the whole point, right? If you can't see it, you can't change it. And so this was really a reflection as far as how are we going to do that in our own building, and are we walking the walk? And so how do I tell them that it goes from this to that? And this is the experience they had when they were walking into this building. They all saw the old version, right? Let's see, this is another kind of pretty version. This was our downstairs in the newsroom. So that's God is dead in German, if anyone's wondering. When you walk down in the building, there are, it's pretty emotional. So you go into this building, and if you think about it, it's vacant for 40 years. You walk down there's one stairwell that goes downstairs. You go down and you shine your flashlight out because there's no electricity at all. I mean, that's cleaned up, right? Because there's electricity in that picture. And so when I stood about, let's see, here, yep, right about here, you see that there are 3 doorways on the north side, and then there's 3 doorways on the south side. That's where everyone would enter the train station and where they would have left the train station. If you can imagine that, right, the ceilings are about 25, 30 feet high, it's pitch black, you're shining your flashlight, and you basically just see different graffiti all over and beautiful subway tile and incredible architecture. And all of a sudden you really start to feel it, that this is where people would go to war, right? They would come home and meet people they haven't seen in how long? This is where caskets came back sometimes. I mean, this is an incredibly emotional place. And you talk about the amount of stories that have impacted Omaha families that happened there, in that spot. And so that was the whole reason why we decided we really have to see if this is going to be our home. And many times I would call Hearst and say, look, I get it, at the end of the day, if we can't figure it out, if we come into a problem that we can't figure out, I understand, but I need to know why we're not doing it. It has to be that it's that clear, because it is that important. And Hearst absolutely agreed. They're an incredible company, and they absolutely understand the value of localism. So how does that go to something like, yes, come on. I think I have to keep paying attention. I think it's getting insecure. There we go. So then it would turn into something like that, which I think I now have a picture of our pretty newsroom. So that's what it looks like now, where it was. And as you can see, we didn't, redo all the tile and all that. We kept those scuffs because we thought that's part of the history, that's part of the stories, the characters. Something happened at some point to make it look like that, and we wanted to keep that. We did take away all the graffiti except one piece, and I kept one piece because I thought it was important. So then this is the east lobby. This is the only area that we were actually able to reconstruct how it used to look. And it's because it had all interior walls. And if you notice, like that whole beam is there, but then that one was gone. And it just, it was pretty messed up. So what we did was we had a few artists come in, and they were actually able to recreate it. They put plastic down, they basically made the room their canvas, and they one by one recreated everything in that room to look like that. And that again is a huge testament to Hearst. The historical tax credits and the reason that they have them there, they actually said all we have to do is put up drywall and save whatever's behind it. We don't have to recreate anything in that room. But Hearst decided that we have all these places in the building that we can tell these stories of the history of the building. We have nothing from 1898 that really gives people that understanding of, can you imagine being on a boat, going to, then a train. You might have been on a boat and a train for how long? For a month? Imagine how you feel when you get off of that train, right? And you're going to this place called Omaha for the Trans-Mississippi Exposition. You might have just been to the World's Fair, but oh no, this one is on the other side of the river. So that's really cool, right? I mean, but when you come into a place like that, the whole purpose was, architecture was screaming, drop your bags and stay, right? It was saying, we want to boom Omaha. And so this was the only way we could tell that story. There was one room in the whole building that we could actually recreate to what it was, because we knew actually what was there. So then this was our studio. So how do you tell them that this is going to be your studio with all those columns? Yeah, we're going to fix it. Don't worry, it'll be just fine, right? But being able to articulate the vision that this is actually what it's going to become, right? As far as articulating the vision, we brought everybody through that. We told them the story. Yeah. One of the tricks I used actually was to see, you have to test yourself on, are you actually telling them the story that they need to hear, right? And the way I did that was I actually tried to, I'm trying to pull a video for you guys. But the way I did that was I actually tried to see if they could tell me the story in their words. So what I tried to do was to say, okay, well, now I'm not going to tell you anything. Now you take this and make it your story, right? So I actually had Brandy and Rob and Vaughn Jones and my news director just go in and do a story as they would any other story. And so that, to me, I think was that confirmation, right? And that's what I try and do when we try to articulate the vision with our staff and our teams. I always try to ask them questions where they can repeat it back to me, so that then I'm understanding, okay, are you hearing that? Am I articulating it correctly, right? Because a lot of the times you don't know if you're articulating it correctly. You might say all kinds of things. You might have, an incredible vision, and you think that that's exactly what everybody's going to pick up on, but you have no idea if they're actually picking up on that. So a lot of the times I ask them, can you repeat it back to me? And I'll just ask them different questions to see if what I'm saying is actually impacting them the right way. So I also asked them to do a story. So they did a story that was all about the Burlington. And it was just, go for it, which was great. Because then they were able to, I was able to see it in their eyes. What is it going to be? So they went through this entire building in the story, and I didn't direct anything. And they just said, this is this room, and this is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do here, and blah, blah, blah. And they went through every single piece, which was incredible, because now I'm realizing, okay, all these moments, all these different ways that we're trying to connect with you and we're trying to tell the story, it's now becoming something that they're owning themselves and that they're articulating and telling other people. It's their story, right? One of the biggest things that I would say whenever you do a big change, well, there's two things I would tell you, three things I would tell you. The first is, don't try to be everybody's everything, right? It's the team a lot of times that is going to actually get the team there. The leader is going to lead them and is going to make sure they don't go off course. But if you know you have inspiring people on the team that people connect with, those internal leaders, you really have to connect with them. Make sure that they're articulating it so that they're echoing what is appropriate and what you think is most helpful for your team. The other side of it is the community. There are some people who are never going to really see that what you're planning is going to be right until they're in it. That's just how they operate, right? Well, a lot of those people, what I found is when we started promoting this idea and we started going out in the community and saying, oh, this is what we're going to do, some of my hardest, like the hardest sells that were, like, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, Ariel, were actually turned because, they'd be at a grocery store and a neighbor would be there and they go, hey, wait, aren't you at KTV? You guys are the one that are doing that really cool thing with the building. I love that, that's amazing. They tell them a story about, someone that they knew and they went to war from that building and how incredible it was. So the community really began to help too, right? It's not just about our little plan. It's how do we invite the whole community, the whole team, everybody? Because if you want people to own something, you gotta let them own it. That means you gotta give up. You gotta give up that power. You have to give up that leadership, ego thing you have, whatever it is. But you have to give it up so that you can let them own it in the only way that they're going to, right? And that's their journey. That's personal to them. And then the other thing was there were people who weren't going to change. They were opting out. We call it the Burlington Purge. It's tough because some of those people actually did work here a long time and were incredibly influential and helpful and great. But one of the things that they did not do well was deal with change well. It wasn't a bad thing that they left when they did. It actually worked out really well for them and it worked out well for us because it allowed us to kind of break through that next level of, okay, now we have an entire team that whether you liked it or not, the process, you changed. You changed with the organization and look at the spot that we're in now. And so then they can really reflect on that and be proud of their own journey and what they accomplished going into KTV. And it's incredibly difficult. I mean, we literally turned the lights off at one station at First News at 7 a.m. and had to figure out a way with all new equipment, get that material into the system, be live at 5 p.m. that same day, right? So that required an intense amount of research, rehearsals, all kinds of things, and they did it. They accomplished it. It was fantastic. So then the last thing I would say is 6 months after any kind of move, don't change anything until 6 months. And that's what I would tell people. It was kind of the way that there was so much thought and planning that went into how we were going to live in this space, where we were going to eat, where we were going to put our trash, what we were going to do. We thought of everything we could possibly think of. But it's you have to drive a different way to work, you have to go a different way to the bathroom. You've got to figure things out differently. It's uncomfortable and it's annoying and you just kind of sometimes wish it was all the same, right? Well, it's going to take 6 months for it to sink in. And so whenever anyone would have these suggestions of like, we really don't like this idea, we want to do this, we want to go back to that, I would say, okay, I love that, hold on to that in 6 months, let's have that same conversation, let's see if it's a problem. So I didn't have to tell them, no, you're wrong, because they might be right, and I should be open to that. But I also want to make sure they were in an environment where, I knew it's going to be difficult. I know it's not going to be easy. I give you that. So let's do this together. Let's give it 6 months together, and then let's figure it out. In the end, there wasn't really anything that we changed. So I don't think. There's probably something. I don't know about. But I don't think we changed anything, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You want to pull a chair up, just have a seat in front, and maybe we can do some Q&A and answer some, or ask some questions, and see who wants to get the dialogue started. And Ariel, if you'd repeat the question after you.
Sure, you got it.
Okay.
I can jump in. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about your culture. So you wanted this building to reflect the culture you had, but how did it change the culture, or has it changed the culture?
So the question is, how has the culture changed? How has this changed the culture, right? As a result from the building. I would say it affirmed who we are. You know, we get a lot of, as you're pretty well aware, the media is not, people are not always nice to the media. QLI is, but not everybody. And so I would say that, you know, we know who we are, right? We know that, you know, people don't get into this business because you're gonna get rich. That's not why you do this. You get into this business because you wanna make a change in your community, and you work hard to do that. And so, so it's personal. You know, sometimes you just have to do the news of the day. And that's sometimes very exciting, sometimes it's not. But in the end, the whole organization is trying to make a difference. And I would say it in every level. So in sales, we're trying to make a difference with local businesses. And we're really serious about that. And with the community, we're telling some stories that some people don't want to hear. And they get mad at us, right? This was really about, you do the right thing. In the end of the day, this is an organization that does the right thing. And even when and especially when it's hard, right? Because this was definitely hard, but we didn't back away from it because we knew who we are, and we know that this is our culture of what we do. And when we have a tough story and nobody wants to talk, you might have to dig a little bit harder because it's worth it and it's the right thing to do. So I think it affirmed who we are. And I think that's why, you know, we went about doing it that way. We kind of looked at who we are first and then tried to find a building or a home that would reflect it. But that whole process just affirms, you know, it's like, I mean, storytelling is difficult, right? So.
Can you tell us a little bit about the makeup of your employees? Like, how many people came from one building to here?
Yeah.
Then how many departments do you have? Or, you know,
Sure.
what is that? I'm trying to figure out how that change looked in all of the
Sure,
different
so
facets.
so the question is basically organizationally, structurally, kind of who are we?
Mhm.
So we're 125 employees. We have, the departments that it's broken up into is business, which is pretty small. Then you have sales. Then you have engineering, creative services. Creative services actually services both sales with commercial production and news with promotions. And then you have the news department. And I would say that, I mean, everybody came over except for, I think 3 people ended up leaving. One was a retirement, and then 2 others were other jobs that they got. So we really brought everybody over. I mean, the process was pretty intense coming over because we had to have, we had 3 weeks prior to our move date. And I would say it's a part of the presentation that I didn't get to. But I would say part of that process was really about making sure that they felt confident in operating in this building. And so what we would do for 3 weeks is we would have the morning shift would come in, and they would do their newscast over at 26 and Douglas, and then they would come over here for 3 hours and practice. And then the evening shift would start here and then go back there. And so the news director would manage the news over there, the assistant news director would manage the rehearsals over here. And we did that for 3 weeks straight. The assistant news director at the time, Vaughn Jones, who is our current news director now, he was brilliant. One of the things he did was he pushed them to the point of being uncomfortable. So first it was, here's how everything works. Here's what we can do. But not only was our technology changing, everything was changing. I mean, we used to sit at a desk, if you remember, and we didn't move, right? Now everyone has, I mean, there's choreography, right? Okay, you have to walk over here. Okay, this monitor has to come up. I mean, we didn't have all those monitors before. right? So we had to redesign how a newscast would even look and practice that too. So everybody, producers, anchors, photographers, everybody had to do something new. Yeah.
Do you think that had to go hand in hand with the newness of your building?
Yes.
Or was that just a progression of your business?
No, I think it had to, because when you think about KUTV is in this new building, right? Well, what does that mean for the community? A lot of people who are down here think, well, that's great. That's great. It's in, close to the old market. We love it, blah, blah, blah. But what does that mean to you at home in your living room, to the vast majority of people? Does that mean that you have a better newscast? It should, right? It should, because our efforts have to be about storytelling. As big and as crazy as this idea was, and as big of an investment it was for Omaha, the value I bring to the community every day is not in a building, even though that's a good benefit. The value is in the newscast. So I had to make sure that that newscast was beautiful, it was new, and it set a new direction and a new tone in Omaha and how we're going to tell stories, and hopefully inspires other people to do the same. And that was the goal. But they did it, and one of the things that he did in those rehearsals was he pushed them to the brink of insanity on one of them. It was like a Sunday, and they thought at the end of that, oh gosh, what did we do wrong? We had all these transitions, all these things, and he looked at it and he's like, okay, let's look at what we did wrong. So we went back and we looked at it. They were able to study it. The next day he did a really easy one that was just your typical newscast, nothing too crazy. And this entire time they had no idea what their start date was. Because I didn't want them focusing on, oh gosh, we screwed up and it's in 3 days. What are we gonna do? I wanted them feeling confident. So when we saw that the team was confident on how to operate and how to do everything, we said, okay, let's do it tomorrow. And it all worked out.
So Methodist is doing a lot of moves right now. We moved into your old space, our community health clinic, and we're moving all of our corporate employees way out to 168th and Pacific. And so I want to hear more about some of the decisions that you engaged the team in to help. You talked about they picked their chairs. What were some of the other things that you allowed them to come into and make decisions on?
So engaging them in the whole process was a big deal for me. So I brought them in, I had them look at cubicles. Of course, when I did that, I realized everyone wants to build a cubicle that looks like an office. But it did allow me to have the conversation, right? And so the cubes that we ended up picking are nothing, they're very small, they're nothing like an office. But I was able to talk to them about what I was looking for in that design, and I want them to be able to have eye contact. I want them to be able to look up and see if a manager walks into their office so they can go grab them if they need them. I wanted that type of interaction. So I would say even when it was like, that didn't go the way I wanted, right? It allowed me to have a conversation with them about why, so that they could buy into it at an early stage. So the cubicles we did, the creative services department is a huge one, so they all have their own offices, and if you think they're all editors and very creative people, now they're all at one table. And one of the reasons I wanted them to do that was I have some people that are amazing writers. I have some people that can hear sound and editing incredibly. A lot of them have a skill set that one trait is much stronger than the others, right? So I thought, well, if I can put them all at one table and use some form of technology, then they're able to share their work, and maybe we get, maybe we harness the power of all their strengths. Well, that's a really hard transition. So one of the things that we did was we put, we have a screen in there similar to this, but it works a lot better. And they just press this button on their computer anytime they want, and whatever is on their computer will just go up to this big screen. They can have up to 4 of them on there. And that way they don't have to get up. They can just go, hey, can you take a look at this? And they can just look up and see it. So we did that, and then I also did things like, I knew that people, yeah.
Follow up on that. You also let them have a choice about something that was important.
Exactly, that's exactly where I'm going.
Good.
So I also said, you used to have your own office, and so now you don't. So what headphones would you like? And so, you know, it's those kind of things too, that's like, we understand that it's uncomfortable. It's gonna be uncomfortable when there's change or something new. But how do we make it as comfortable as possible and then have some fun with it? Because then, is there a benefit to this? Let's try to show them that benefit as quickly as possible. So those were some things that we did too. And then I would just say, in general, the layout of the space, it was really, most of it is about including people earlier on in the process so that it can sit with them. And a lot of the times I think the mistake people make is they just want it to be perfect before they tell anybody anything, because then they'll love it. Well, even though my idea was perfect, nobody loved it when I first gave it to them. You know, it was really about, okay, I got 2 years here. I got 2 years to make them all buy in. So how do I do that, right? So a lot of it is time. I mean, most of it is. And then they come to you with questions on how to engage in the process or what to do, because they're thinking about it. And they're like, you know, if this is how it's going to be, then if we thought about this, you know, I mean, I have, for example, trash cans that aren't under people's desks. They're somewhere else. That is a very difficult transition for people you would not believe, right? They can't believe it. They're like, what happens when I have a cold? It's ridiculous, you know, I need a trash can under my desk. It's like, it's 6 feet away. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But it is actually. It upsets their day. And so it's about getting used to those things. But that was actually something that was a suggestion from an employee that said, you know, we could all just get out of our chairs with you a little bit more often and be a little healthier if we didn't have trash cans under our desk, if we thought about that, right? And so because I was including people in the process, people started bringing me ideas that I could, you know, I could actually put into place before they moved in there. Whereas if I waited till it was like, had a bow around it, I don't think I would have had half the ideas.
Just to piggyback on your trash can situation, that happened at Conagra too, and it was a huge deal.
Yes.
Getting rid of the trash cans. But you mentioned, I think a lot of things came into place really nicely. Like you had the support of FIRST and you had the support of the community. Have there been other changes that you've made where you haven't felt that same support and yet you still have to lead people through that? One example with Conagra, I think everyone's aware of the headquarter change, and I feel like that was obviously the community was not super supportive of that decision. It affected the community in a large way, but I'm curious, you know, maybe how our leaders could take some guidance through that kind of a change, or if there are any other examples you have where things weren't going that way.
Yeah, I think, I mean, over my career, there's been several. I would say some have been so egregious that I actually left the company, and because I didn't believe in what they were doing. But I would say most of them that have been difficult, if it's the right thing to do for an organization, and it just happens to be difficult and uncomfortable for people, you can usually point to what is your core mission, right? Your core mission is not actually to make everyone feel really comfortable and never change, right? That's not your core mission. But if you can point to, look, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, and this is what makes this is why we're going to be stronger. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to make a choice. There's a time and a place to engage the community in your process, and engage, you know, it's just like when you have news in your family. You know, sometimes you just talk to your family, and you make sure that they're okay, and you make sure that they're confident, and you work through everything with them so that when they go out into the community, they can feel good about it, right? So a lot of times I look at it in phases, you know, it's about making sure that the changes that we're making, you know, I mean, certainly there are things that Hearst does that is, it's a corporate goal and that they have to do. And there's a good reason behind it, you know? So I think as the leader, you have the reason and the expectation of yourself, and everyone else expects you to ask those questions as to why, right? You have access that other people don't have. And so if there is a change coming, if there is something that's uncomfortable, then you hope your leadership locally is going to be the one who has asked those tough questions of your company and really understood this is why we're doing it, and this is why it's important for us all to do this together. And if we do, we'll be stronger for all of these reasons, right? I think the mistake people make is they they don't feel like they have permission to ask those questions, but yet then they think they're the ones that are supposed to lead you through change. Well, you can't lead people through change if you don't know what direction you're going, right, or why you're going there. So I think part of that is you must make sure that you know why you're doing it and keep pushing. You know, and the one time I left a company, I left because we were basically giving away television, and it was not a good situation. They were giving away television in a way that was to support a different product, and they were using the news department as well. And when I found out, because I kept asking why, when I found out why we were doing it, I realized that was good enough for me to leave, right? Because I couldn't sell that. Right, I didn't think it was right, and I needed to find a different path. But I would say that it's the expectation of your people is to make sure that you ask those questions, because they're going to ask them of you, and they want to know that they're working for a company that appreciates that kind of engagement and isn't afraid of it, that wants to tell you why, that wants to include you, right? And if we don't do that, sometimes we give a false image of the company we're working for just because we were too uncomfortable to ask those questions. When the company was probably very willing to tell you why they're doing it.
You have time for one more question?
I had sort of a follow-up if
Okay.
someone else has a question.
Can someone who hasn't asked, a question have one? No? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead with your follow-up.
Oh,
Brett, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Either way.
Go ahead.
So you expressed that sometimes just time is what's important to let people come along with
Yeah.
you. Anything that you learned about yourself or any advice you have for, you said sometimes you have to let yourself just be uncomfortable
Yeah.
as people come along.
Yeah.
Anything that you learned about or advice you have on, as a leader that's directing change, being comfortable and confident with
Yep.
the time?
That's a
element?
great question. So being comfortable with being patient and uncomfortable. I put a timeline together so that I know when I'm gonna be comfortable. So you can kind of withstand just about any amount, at least I feel like I can, any amount of like, oh, this is not gonna be good, or this is gonna be uncomfortable for a while, or we'll get through this. As long as you know what the purpose of that is, it's purposeful, right? It's purposeful work to feel a little uncomfortable. It's purposeful to make people feel like, they're not gonna get it right away. And it's really obnoxious for me to expect them to, right? I had 2 years to get it, and I'm gonna expect them to just get it like that. So I think that what I do is I put a timeline together and say, okay, if I want them to walk in on October 28th of 2015 and feel proud and feel like they're part of this place, that this is their home, that they're a part of the journey, what are the elements that actually need to be baked into that so that when they walk in that door, they've actually had an experience, I've helped build an experience for them, right? And so if you have those opportunities, when they're walking through and with construction hats on and you're telling them, this is your new work area, that they're going, no, it's not. I can't believe that. But you know that the purpose of that is that when they walk in your plan, they're gonna have that baked in feeling, right? So I would say it's know when you're gonna act, when it's gonna come together, and then stick to that plan. Because that gives you the confidence in the moment to be like, I know, let's just let them have that, right? That it's not gonna be that comfortable. But it's purposeful.
So, in closing, there's a story that you often tell about the very beginning of this process, before you knew where anything was going to be. You knew you needed to be someplace different. Your CFO was coming in was he in New York City?
Yeah.
And you were given a list of potential sites. And you looked at that list and you said, do you remember?
That none of them look like a home.
None of them look like the home, and you said, show me something that you think we
Show me
would.
something that you think, well, he said that. He said, show me something that you think we would think is completely insane.
Show me something that you think. So the whole process started with the leader saying, help me think outside my box.
Yep.
Show me something different. And because they started the process like that, it took them in a direction that was completely different. It would have been too late 6 months
Yeah.
later. Would
Right.
you agree with that?
Right, and it really was. I think it's about giving people permission to fail, you know, and that takes planning, right? Because so often we're trying so hard to get it all done right away, and we have this timeline, we have these deadlines, but if you can plan, when are we allowed to fail, right? There has to be time for that. And if you can plan that in, then you actually might go in a completely different, even better direction, because you planned that safe space to fail.
So you
Yeah.
hear, what's interesting is you hear the intentionality in Ariel's story, the intentionality around space for humanity. In the midst of all the plans and the blueprints and the practice and the rehearsing, she said, we're better at this because we're human. And humanity is messy. And we're going to create space for that creativity, for that failure, because we know in the end that space will lead us to a higher level of excellence. And that was your goal from the beginning. And so with that, it's 9 o'clock. We all have places to go. Would you join me in thanking Ariel?